will come up soon enough. So I'm trying to remember if we started the new mimer. I came across a very beautiful mimer from the Alter Rebbe, which he gave a year after his release from prison. And that would have been, let's see, that's here. So it would have been in the year 1799. So he was released 1798. And then a year later, in Hanukkah, or 1799, he gave this discourse. And I'm going to read you the preface to this, and you'll get it. Hopefully we'll get it up on the screen soon enough. So, the Gemara Shabbos, it describes how, the whole story of Hanukkah is basically described, and the laws for Hanukkah are all in Tractate Shabbos, page 21b. Interestingly, you don't have a mention of it in the Mishnah much. I mean, it's mentioned by the way, but not as, you don't have a section in the Mishnah talking about Hanukkah, but it's all spoken about in the Gemara Shabbos, where it's talking about different Shabbos candles, what you can use for lighting. It gets onto the topic of Hanukkah. So the Gemara describes how the festival of Hanukkah was established by the sages. Jewish people defeated their enemies, the Greek army, on the 24th of Kislev. The next day, on the 25th of Kislev, they started lighting the menorah using the one jug of oil, right? That famous cruse of oil that was able to burn. It had enough oil for one day, but it miraculously burned for 8 days. So that miracle occurred on the 25th. The next year, the sages established that from the 25th of Kislev, the Jewish people should celebrate for 8 days every year. So when was the holiday of Hanukkah established? Not the year that the miracle happened, or first of all, not the day. The miracle of the oil, but the miracle of the victory was the day prior, and it was the next day, but it was also the next year, right? So during these 8 days, the Jewish people, it says in the Gemara, should recite Hallel and psalms of praise to Hashem. They should add special praise of gratitude to Hashem, the passage of Al Anisim in the Shemona Esrei, in the Bracha of Modim, and in Birkas Hamazon, in the Bracha of Noda Lecha. These are all, right, the sections of Shemona Esrei and the section of benching that are about gratitude, that are expressly about gratitude. So the Alter Rebbe will analyze the meaning of Hoda'ah as more than simple gratitude, but also meaning to admit that Hashem's perspective is correct, as will be explained soon. So it is a very interesting word in Hebrew. So we say, how do you say gratitude in Hebrew? Is Hoda'ah. How do you say thank you in Hebrew? Todah. Like we all said this morning, Moda'ani, I am thankful before you. It's exactly the same word in Hebrew as the word for admitting. We're going to see this later on. The Alter Rebbe will get into this and bring out why these words are so closely related, is they're really the core is the same. So the Alter Rebbe recited this mimer on the 19th of Kislev of the year 5560. So that would be 1799. Right? You guys know that after Perestroika and after the Soviet Union fell, Judaism started to flourish in Russia, and you had a lot of Jewish schools, and in these Jewish schools, of course, they would teach all of the necessary Russian history, and then it has the Russian language, and all of these classes together with Torah, like we have in America, the day schools, right? So the story is told that one of the Russian teachers of the Russian language, looked at the class. They're all, all Chassidic boys, with Teves and yarmulkes, right? But they're learning Russian history. And she says, "Who can tell me what great thing happened in the year 1799?" And one boy raises his hand tentatively. He calls on him and says, "Yes, Mendel, what happened in 1799? And he said, "The Alter Rebbe was let out of prison." She was aghast. She says, "No, that's not what I'm referring to. I'm talking in 1799, Alexander Pushkin was born, a great Russian poet, an author." So she was a little disappointed, but she continued on. "And what happened in 1812? Nobody in the class knew. Nobody raised their hand, but the same boy, Mendel, he tentatively raises his hand again. And she calls on him and he says, "Yes, Mendel, what happened in 1812? And he said, "Alexander Pushkin's bar mitzvah." Oh, anyway, that was a joke. Okay. But the Alter Rebbe was basically, he was released in 1798, and the first celebration was 1799, the year 5560, Tav Kuf Samech, the first anniversary of his release on Yitzchok Kislev. So just as the sages instituted Hanukkah as the festival the year after the miracle of Hanukkah occurred, similarly, the Alter Rebbe is implying that from the first year after his miraculous release, he establishes the day of the 19th of Kislev as a festival to be celebrated every year. Okay, so that's basically the idea here. It's an interesting thing. When did the Jewish people celebrate the very first Pesach? Anybody? Does anybody know when was that? When did they celebrate the very first Pesach? So funny enough, they celebrated the very first Pesach before they even left Egypt. They hadn't even left Egypt, and they already celebrated Pesach. So they were sitting down at their Seder the night before their release. So we have a very interesting model here that by Pesach they were actually doing the celebration even before the miracle happened. And already when it gets to Golus, when it gets to exile, we have a little bit of a lag until we celebrate. So Hanukkah and likewise the celebration of Yitzchok Kislev was established the year later. And this is how the Alter Rebbe is now going to start the mimer on this theme. And I'm sorry that we don't have it up yet. I don't think you guys don't, do you? Not hearing anybody either. I hope you're still there. Okay. So the Alter Rebbe starts quoting this line from the Gemara that we just learned. So the following year, they established the celebration of the 8 days. They made them into festive days with reciting Hallel and Hoida'ah, thanksgiving to Hashem. We need to understand what is meant by this word, haida'ah, gratitude. And this is the Maimon that Alter Rebbe goes into this idea of gratitude. It says in the Gemara, the time of the mitzvah of lighting the menorah is from when? From when the sun sets until the people stop walking in the marketplace. In the language of the Gemara, it says, Asher tichla regel min hashuk, until the foot stops, ceases from the marketplace. We're going to see at the end of the Maimer that the Rebbe is going to give a remarkable interpretation of this line. The word regel, a foot, also has to do with amunah, with what you do regularly. Regel, regular, regel, what you're always doing and what you put your faith in, what you put your trust in. So normally people put their trust in the marketplace, right? The stock market, the marketplace, the business that they conduct, and that's what their trust is in that. The Alter Rebbe says that the light of the menorah has to illuminate until you cease putting your faith in the market. In other words, he's interpreting the word regel as your faith, and he brings proof in different places. We see the idea of regel having to do with faith. So I'm just giving you, I'm teasing the mimer, giving you kind of what he explains at the end. But the mimer says that the menorah has to illuminate, right? We have to illuminate the darkness until we're not putting our faith. Again, the word regel meaning having a connotation of faith. In the shuk, you have to pull your faith and trust out of the marketplace and put it into Hashem. So, but practically, the Rif on the Gemara explains this to mean that the menorah must be lit within the first half an hour after sunset. Since this is how long people are still walking around outside before it gets too late, too dark to walk outside. The Alter Rebbe now analyzes this teaching on a mystical level. So the idea will be understood based on the following. So we have two different modes of expression. Certainly we have more than that, but two general modes of expression in our prayer. We have on the one hand bracha, which is blessing. On the other hand, we have haida'ah, gratitude. Right? We start off the morning, the Shacharit, with Hodu LaHashem, Kiru Bishmo, Hodu. So Umahu HaHaida'ah. What does this word haida'ah mean in our connection with Hashem? It's basically, like I mentioned before, that the word modeh can either mean being thankful. It could also mean that I admit. It could mean admission. And here's the key to focus on here. Like someone who admits to his friend that he was correct in a matter that they were arguing about. And this really sets up a whole very interesting paradigm of what gratitude is about, and really it touches upon what our whole struggle in life. And what I mean by struggle is our whole purpose is that Hashem created us in such a way that we are very self-centered. Oftentimes, even our selflessness can be self-centered. But that's the teva. That's the teva b'nei adam. This is the nature of people, that we are self-centered. There's a very important reason for this. There's an importance for it, but there's also part of the idea of being self-centered is in order that we overcome it, Hashem made us this way in order for us to find the deeper self, which is selfless, not selfish.
Rabbi
So
Rice,
when someone does, yes, please.
Rabbi, sorry to interrupt you, but which mimer am I looking for in the email to upload if the people want to follow it while you're speaking?
Okay, hold on a second. Let me see if I can send out this email now.
Or maybe they'll just listen. I'm just thinking it might be easier if it's
I can send it via email. If you want to give me a few of the addresses of
If you just send it to me, I'll forward it to everyone.
I did. I sent you. Okay. Oh, perfect. I sent you an email with the link to this mimer.
To Rabbi Smith or to Chabad for Seniors?
It had something about United Generations in the title.
Oh yeah, United Jewish Generations. Okay.
Jewish Generations. Did you find the email?
No. Maybe it's went to spam. Let's see.
I'm going to share it on the WhatsApp. That'll be I think, the most direct
Okay.
way. I'm going to send the link to the mimer right there. Hopefully that will work.
All right, so you can continue teaching. I'll upload it now that I have it.
Right, great, okay. All right. So here's kind of my take on this, is that Hashem obviously did not make us in a full and complete and perfect way, as we probably have figured out by this time. Hashem created us as pieces of clay that need to be molded and sculpted and changed and transformed through our life, and through that we also change and transform the world. But just looking at our own self, and here's the thing about gratitude. We may have had this discussion. I don't recall, because I've been learning this mimer with a few different groups. I don't think we started this one yet. But here's the thing about gratitude. How do you feel when someone expresses gratitude? This is what I'm going to be comparing. I'm going to ask you to think about for a moment. How you feel when somebody expresses genuine gratitude to you. Okay? And then how you feel when you're able to express genuine gratitude to somebody else.
Feeling good or thanks. It makes you feel good. Elevate.
Yeah, when you are able to really say thank you and to really mean and to express that gratitude and to really, feel it, right? It feels very good physically to have genuine gratitude. It's like, wow, that is such an amazing feeling. It actually, I think most of us will agree, it feels even better than receiving gratitude. Would you agree?
Yes.
I mean, if someone says thank you very much, for what you did for something, you enjoy that. We all like to be appreciated. We all, certainly we all, but expressing gratitude. So here's my question to the human being. If gratitude, when we express gratitude, it feels so good, so why don't we do it more often? I don't mean you in particular. I mean, generally speaking, we hold our gratitude close to our vest. We're not expressing it. And anybody have any ideas on this of why we don't express genuine gratitude frequently? I'll tell you. This is my understanding of it. This is my take on it. It is because the way that Hashem designed us, we create what are called neural pathways. And in other words, when you have to drive somewhere that you go to every single day, you don't have to think about it anymore, right? You're on autopilot. You just have to watch out for the pedestrians. But, basically, once you've figured something out in life, you create a neural pathway to continually go in that path without having to think about it, without being mindful. Right? When you're going to a new place, you have to be mindful. You have to think, okay, it's this turn, this exit, right? And if you, even if you have a GPS, you have to be looking to see exactly, do I take this lane, or I need to be in the second lane to the left? The brain has to be engaged. In other words, you have to be mindful of your journey when it's the first time that you're on that path. But once you've done that path many times, what happens is you get into a pathway. You've created a neural pathway. And that neural pathway now allows that journey to become automatic. Like, for instance, speaking. We don't have to think about, how am I going to pronounce the word? Oh, there's a word, apple. How do I? You can't even describe how you pronounce the word apple. There's a sound coming from me, and I'm putting my lips together to make the P. You don't have no idea. It's become so automated, right? So many things in life. So what I'm trying to say is that this automation bit in the human being is very useful. Otherwise, you'd have to be putting a lot of thought into a lot of things that wouldn't necessarily leave you any brain energy for other things that you have to accomplish. Hashem created this amazingly efficient system of the mind. But there is a downside to the automation of the brain. And that is, when something is given to us the first time, now you're mindful of it. You think about it. Wow, that is amazing. Right? The first time your wife makes dinner for you, when you were first married, or your husband makes dinner for you, right? And wow, thank you so much, that was so good. But then after it happens 3,000 times, well, if you're a polite kind of a person, you say thank you each time, but you're not feeling it unless you're really extraordinary. And that's good to be really extraordinary. So the thing is that what I'm describing here, somewhat scientifically, is really what we say in English: we take things for granted, right? We take things for granted. Or, a little bit further than that, we feel entitled. What do I mean that we feel entitled? So if it's not there, we're a little upset. And there are so many things that we take for granted. And so, therefore, and Alfred is going to be describing this in the Mimer, like, how about life itself, right? Now, Alfred uses a little bit more of a takes a little more of a philosophic approach to this idea. That something that happens continuously is very hard to appreciate. I just gave the scientific side of that. So, as human beings, in terms of our brain and the mindfulness of our brain, we tend to take things for granted. That's by design. That's the design of the automation of the brain.
There's a thing is, the force of habit. It's a force.
Once again?
It's another form. It's the force of habit. Comes habit. It's forceful.
Force of habit. Right. Yes. The force of habit. Yes. Yes, indeed. So now, when someone does something for me, you know what I have to do? I have to admit that this is something special. I have to admit that this person just did something for me that I'm not entitled to. Why do I feel entitled to it? Because it's been happening every day for 1,000 days or 10,000 days. It's been happening, so I take it for granted. But I have to admit that I'm not entitled to it. Once I have to admit that I'm not entitled to it, and why do I say admit? Admission means that when you really are holding on to something that disagrees with it. Because if I just totally agree with somebody, I don't admit to them, I agree with them. When you're admitting to someone, that means that you held on to a different view, and maybe even now you kind of still are clinging on to that a little bit. Right? So that's how we use the word admit. To admit to somebody, it's kind of like, I'm still holding on to my view, but I got to admit yours is the right way. That means you're still connected. You still have attachment to your wrong view. So what wrong view do we stay attached to? That I'm entitled to it. We still feel, I'm entitled to it. But we have to realize at the end of the day, we say, you know what? We're not entitled to this one iota. So I admit, so once I can admit that I'm not entitled to it, now I can come to lahodos, to express gratitude. Now let's see this inside. And I don't know if you've received the mimer yet. We're at the bottom of page 4. If you are able to open that up. So what does the word hoda'ah mean in our connection with Hashem? In addition to the meaning of gratitude, it also means admitting, like someone who admits to his friend that he was correct in a matter that they were arguing about. So in our context, hoda'ah means that we are admitting that Hashem is correct in the issue that we were disagreeing with him about. What were we disagreeing with Hashem about? That we now admit that he is correct. And now the Alter Rebbe goes and talks about the idea of really what drives all of life. What drives all of life ultimately is tainug. Tainug is pleasure. And much of our life is based on either what we can do to receive pleasure or what we can do to avoid tremendous pain. Like having to live without a roof over your head or without food and without sustenance, right, would be tremendous displeasure. So we work on making sure that we have it. People work during their lives to be able to have security and to have children and to, all of these things have to do ultimately with, I don't mean here that we're pleasure seeking. We're pleasure seekers. But really we are pleasure seekers, not necessarily that we're, in eating and physical sensational pleasure, but life is driven by the fact that we don't want to experience displeasure, and we want to live in a pleasureful, enjoyable environment and way of being. So the idea is as follows: each person has the power of having pleasure, and we have what's called a life force. A life force is the force inside of us that is basically sustaining us, giving us life. Now, page 5. The way that pleasure works is usually from something outside of the person. Like you're enjoying something physical, like a food. Or when a person understands a concept, which is also an idea that was shared with him from outside of his mind. So you get an idea, or you work on putting things together from outside of your mind, and now your brain understands it, so a person can have a great pleasure, right? You can have pleasure from music, from art, that's right? Innumerable things from which a person can derive pleasure. There's something that's coming from outside of himself. And when you get it, when you have it, when you receive it, boy, right? You can listen to a song, you can listen to a symphony orchestra, you can listen to whatever it is that you really enjoy, and you go, wow, and it's such a tainug, such a pleasure, or a piece of steak, or nachas from a grandchild, right? Whatever. These are all very different types of pleasure, but they're all pleasure. And it's interesting. They do. They measure this in the brain now with They can see that in the MRI and see the pleasure centers of the brain. I wonder if nachas from your grandchild and nachas from a piece of steak or whatever you enjoy to eat, or a piece of tofu, or nachas from music, if it's all the same pleasure center. But in any case, they're all pleasure. Even though the process of understanding happens in the person's mind, the idea itself originates outside of the person. Okay, good. Now we're going to take a look at the thing of greatest value to you and to me. What has the greatest value to you? If you think about it. I mean, we're talking about any normal person. This is their greatest value is from life itself, being alive. Hopefully being alive and healthy to whatever degree we can accomplish that. But basically, life itself, right? And what would you be willing to give up so that you can remain alive? Right? Would you say, oh, here's a life-saving procedure, but it would drain your bank account or your investments and your savings? Would you say, it's not worth it? The procedure costs, $500,000. What's going to happen if you don't get it? The person will die. What's the person going to say? It's not worth it. That was like I think it was the Henny Youngman joke. Let's see if a mugger comes to him in the street and says, your money or your life? And he's holding a gun at him. And the guy is not giving him money. So what are you waiting for? He says, I'm thinking about it. So some people we know is very funny because I think Rashi even says, because it says you should love Hashem with all of your heart, with all of your heart, with all of your life, with your whole life, and with all of your money. And we assume we're going from one level to the next. You're going to serve God with all your heart. Not only are you going to give God all of your heart, but you're going to give God all of your soul, your whole life. You give him your whole life. You're going to be willing to give up your life for God. And even more than that, you know what you're going to give? Me'odecha, as Rashi on the pasuk interprets, your money. And Rashi says because some people love money more than their very own life. Shimon, do you believe that?
Yes.
Which is, it seems to be somewhat of an illness. It's a very funny thing. But the truth is, let's go back to the average person. We do everything in our life we do anything and everything to try to make sure that we live, that we have life, that we have health to the degree that we can. Our vitality, this is the most valuable thing. If I say that I'm going to give you $100 million and you're going to live out a week, you got to spend it this week because then you die, you wouldn't take that deal, meaning that your life is worth more than $100 million. So the Alter Rebbe says, however, a person does not usually receive pleasure from his own life force. So everything outside of me, it can happen, and I say, oh, wow, azafar genigin, such a delight. But what about my own life? My own life is really the most valuable thing to me. And it allows me to enjoy every pleasure and live my life. But your own life force, you don't get pleasure from. And here the Alter Rebbe gives us a key to living the most grateful and highest level of life possible. But in truth, a person's own life force is a greater source of pleasure than all other pleasures in the world. Again, a person's own life force, your own vitality, your life. I don't mean your life like, how's life going? I mean your life, your vitality. Your own vitality is a greater source of pleasure than all other pleasures in the world. Since it is this life force, this vitality that enables those pleasures to exist for him. Only after a person is alive in this world is he able to enjoy something or anything. So in any case, without life, a person would not be able to have any pleasure since he's not found in the world, right? So being alive, that is what makes any pleasure possible. And again, we would forego many pleasures if a person realizes that they're sick or ill. They have to not enjoy certain things in life because it's going to make them ill. People will forego pleasures, or people will take painful medicines, right, in order to continue their life. So without the point, the case that the Alter Rebbe is making here is that life itself, we need to really look at life itself as the greatest pleasure. So we see this in common experience, that in truth, a person's life is more valuable to him than any pleasure, for a person will give whatever he has to save his life. As we see, that a person will willingly endure many painful medical procedures to stay alive, right? Hello, Rabbi. Good to see you. So a person will, let's say there's a person has to have a surgery, an operation, and let's say there's no anesthesia, right? And the doctor is doing something and it's so painful. And says, forget it. I'd rather die. That's not a normal thing, right? A person would go through all the pain to be able to stay alive, within reason. From the above is understood is the greatest pleasure. So here's the point that the Alter Rebbe is making. And yet, at the same time, a person does not usually perceive the enjoyment of life itself on a conscious level. Okay, so Alter Rebbe is setting up a stage here for an idea. And let me just tell you what the idea is. He's going to be explaining it very soon. But basically, the idea that the Alter Rebbe is going to be saying here is that it doesn't have to be this way. In other words, how about if you take the greatest pleasure from life itself? Just from being alive. I am alive and I have life. Is there anything greater than that? The answer is no. What else are you can you have that's greater than that? Let's jump to the greatest spiritual thing, right? Let's say you can have a connection with Hashem, but you can't have that connection if you're not alive. In other words, life itself and being alive is the platform through which any and every pleasure on any level can exist. And so now the Alter Rebbe says, the truth is that to receive this pleasure from life itself seems to be impossible. It seems to be very pleasure. Shall we say, for the human being, the origin of pleasure really is going to be the life itself. So how is this possible? The life itself is the greatest pleasure, yet we are not conscious of it. We're not aware of it. And here we're going to give the philosophical answer the Alter Rebbe gives, which is similar to my scientific answer earlier. So there's a concept in philosophic concept, the tainug tamidi einai tainug. That a continuous pleasure, something that is a continuous pleasure, is not a pleasure. So let's take a piece of cheesecake. Does anybody here in this class get pleasure out of eating cheesecake? Or am I alone in this? Are you guys still there? You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So does anybody here enjoy eating cheesecake?
Yes.
You get pleasure? Huh?
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
Now, you don't eat it too much because it's fattening and maybe not healthy. All right. But all of that aside, you eat a piece of cheesecake, it's a pleasure. It's a nice pleasure. Now you eat the first piece of cheesecake and it's a pleasure, and the second and the third, right? Now, all right. Now, what if you would continue eating the cheesecake, let's say for half an hour? All right. Now there's a physical problem here. The physical problem here is that you're going to become full, and it's no longer going to be pleasureful. It's going to be disgusting because you're going to become totally gorged on the food. But I want to remove that factor for a moment, just for the sake of understanding that even if you could continue eating it, let's say for whatever reason, right? You would not continue enjoying it because a continual pleasure is not, or let's do something much easier. Sorry, I don't know why I went to the cheesecake. Let's say a piece of music that you just love listening to. Okay? You're going to love listening to it for a certain amount of time. But after, say, 15 minutes, and you've listened to it, and you're going to listen to it again, 15 minutes have passed, you're not going to listen to it a third time. And even if you listen to it a third time, you're not going to listen to it a fourth time. And if it continues playing again and again and again, you're not going to enjoy it anymore. Because pleasure has to do with an ebb and a flow. You have it, whoa, that's great. Now you don't have it. There are certain food items that I tell my wife, I say, don't buy it all the time because I want to continue enjoying it. The more, if I have it every single day, it's available, I don't enjoy it. I say, don't, the art of really enjoying things is to make sure they're not always available to you. And so this is all based on the philosophic notion that a tainug tamidi is not a tainug. It's not a constant and consistent pleasure is not a pleasure. Therefore, before the person was born into the world, he was not able to perceive the enjoyment of being alive. And after he's born into the world, his enjoyment from being alive is constant, and therefore he is unable to experience that pleasure of being alive. Why? Because of the reason that he just said, because it's constant. The being aliveness is a constant thing. Now, it's interesting. This, in my mind, this would be a perfect place to insert when during our regular life, regular healthy life, when would you say is a time of when you do become aware that you're alive? I'm not talking about someone who had a near-death experience. I'm talking about regular healthy living. Is there a time during the day when you become aware that you're alive?
When you wake up.
When you wake up in the morning, perfect, right? And that's why, in fact, we do have, at that point, now, even the awareness that I am alive is really given to us by Yiddishkeit, right? Yiddishkeit teaches us this idea. And in fact, the Rebbe explains in a Sikha, he says the whole reason why human beings need to sleep is so that every day can have a renewal and a reappreciation, to be filled with gratitude anew that he is alive. Every morning we wake up and we realize, I'm alive. So Yiddishkeit gives us that perspective, because otherwise, most human beings would wake up and not think about the fact that, I'm alive, and to be grateful. Some people maybe would get there, but most of us would be, okay, got to go, it's time to go get the coffee ready or do whatever I need to do. Yiddishkeit teaches us, okay, I'm alive. Wow, what a gift. So at 4 p.m., I'm not so much thinking about, what a gift. But at least when we wake up in the morning, we certainly have that opportunity to realize and remember that I'm alive and to be thankful for that. And that's why we recite the Maidani. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't go into that here. He just talks about the fact that we have the consistent life, constant and consistent life. He says basically, therefore, we don't experience the pleasure. I mean, this is in so many areas of life, right? What about, your spouse? You see newlyweds, people that are newly married, and they have this, this passion and this, wow, I'm so lucky, and but after time, it's normal for that to wane, and it takes effort to maintain the opposite of entitlement and the opposite of taking things for granted and realizing the unbelievable gift and blessing that we have. And here the Alter Rebbe says a very important line at the bottom of page 6, the last bold line there. However, in truth, this is a big mistake. What is a big mistake? The mistake is to take for granted the most important thing in our life, the very fact that we are alive. And instead we allow it to remain a subconscious awareness, right? Instead of a conscious appreciation. A person, and what the Alter Rebbe is basically telling us over here, he doesn't necessarily spell the whole thing out, he gives us a few words on it. But a person should use his or her mind to think about what is truly important, what is essential, and what is the ultimate pleasure that is the source of all pleasure. On a simple level, this means to be grateful for life itself. This is a conscious act that requires reflection. On a deeper level, it means to be grateful for the true life, which is Hashem, who is the source of life. He is the source of all life, including our very own life. So the point is, in order for us to not take it for granted, we really have to consciously think about it. That's the bottom line. So the Alter Rebbe said that quoting the philosophic idea that a constant pleasure is not a pleasure. Again, like I explained earlier at the beginning of the class, that's because we create a neural pathway, starts to become created for that. And with the neural pathway now comes the inability to have pleasure and enjoyment from it, because now it's automatic. Wow, it's an amazing idea. But the Alter Rebbe says you don't have to. It doesn't have to be automatic. We can take it out of its automation. See, the problem with automation is it no longer requires mindfulness. The Alter Rebbe says we can take it out of its automation through being mindful and realizing that life itself is the most valuable thing that we have. It's, if you stop 10 people in the street and you say, what is the most valuable thing to you? Okay, now we all know the answer because we've been studying this mimer. But what do you think most people would answer if they didn't study this mimer? What's the most valuable thing to you in life?
Money.
Unfortunately, I am not hearing it. Did you say
Money.
money?
The average person.
Money, right. Here's the funny thing. Few people will say that, but for a lot of people, they act that way, right? The way that they act is going to be much more telling than what they say. So there's money, or let's even say something like relationships, my children, right? My relationship with God, or a spiritual person, a religious person might say. There are a lot of answers, some of them loftier, some of them less lofty.
Rabbi.
But just one second, David. But in truth, what should be most valuable to us? The fact that I'm alive. The fact that I'm alive right now, this is the most valuable thing to me. Sorry, David, go ahead.
Susan is commenting in the chat because she doesn't have audio or video. She says, "I believe that my subconscious is always in a state of gratitude for Hashem, for God."
Okay, thank you. Who is that from?
Susan.
Susan. I figured that sounded like Susan. So, yes. First of all, with you, Susan, I definitely believe that that's true. What the Alter Rebbe is saying here also is that we should be endeavoring to bring it from our subconscious into our conscious thought. And I'll share with you what I do frequently during the day to remind myself of this. And it's chapter 8 in my book, in case if you still have my book, if you can find it on your shelf, 4 Keys of Kabbalah. So when people ask me how I'm doing, do you know what I respond? Does anybody here remember? Somebody asked me, "Oh, how are you doing?" My response is, "Never better, Baruch Hashem." Never better. And sometimes people are, some people say, "Yeah, that's great. Oh, wonderful," right? And sometimes people think, "Oh my, this must be the highest point of your life." Well, yes, it is. You know why? Because it's the only moment of my life. How could this not be the highest point of my life? The day I got married, the day I had my first child, the day of my bar mitzvah, whatever, the day I met the Rebbe. These are all amazing days, but they're all memories. That's not my life. My life today is right now. Is this the highest point of my life? And let me put it In other words, it's the only point of my life. People,
Rabbi.
right? So if yes, please, David.
Yeah, when
Go
I
ahead.
used to go to work. I worked in a hospital with a bunch of people. So I would ask them, "How are you?" or "How you doing?" They give me the worst possible answer that I felt. They'd say, "Not too bad, not too bad," and I'd say, "What does that mean? It means bad, but not too bad."
They wanted to hedge their bets.
What is that in Yiddish?
Or how about it could be worse?
Yeah, right. But
To which
they
you could
tell me
respond, how do you know that? Maybe this is actually the worst it could possibly be.
that's right.
And if this is the worst that it could possibly be, then you know what? It's not too bad. But
No,
my
it's
point,
bad, but it's not too bad.
The thing is that my response, never better, helps me remember that this moment is the highest point of my life. Why? Because I'm alive. And as far as my life is concerned, this is the only point of my life. Are you living any other point? Is there any other point of your life that you are presently living? Let's say tomorrow you're going to win the lottery, right? The greatest thing is going to happen to you. Let's even say Mashiach comes later on today, but that's not now. Now, of course, this is goes a little into a superpower, but it gives us a certain ability and way to live our life in a very miraculous way, and realizing the blessing of right now. And if everything turns out my way and everything I want is what happens, that's phenomenal. And if it doesn't change the fact of never better. Right now is the high point of my life. So the Alter Rebbe says, and we'll continue with this, God willing, next week with better technology and everything, that even though, go ahead.
Yeah, I mentioned this once before, that they were interviewing the Rebbe's wife, the Rebbitzin, and somebody said to her, "What's the greatest moment of your life?" And they thought they were going to say when she met the Rebbe, when this happened, when she had it, So she said, "This moment right now."
Wow, I never heard this story. Where did you see this? Do you recall?
So I'm not sure. Someplace on Chabad.org.
Okay. Oh, very nice, very nice. And that's got to be, our attitude in life. Or that is the way to live, and it's all predicated on what Alter Rebbe is saying right here, right? That life itself, you could have a good life, you could have a great life, you could have a mediocre life, you could even have chas v'shalom. Some days you could have a painful life. What do they all have in common? Life.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Yeah.
there's another side of this, which is joy, is that we use it all the time. I'm enjoying myself. What are you enjoying? Myself. The cheesecake is just a vehicle for you to enjoy yourself in eating it.
Right. Oh, very nice. Very nice. You're saying that you have to enjoy the self itself.
Enjoy this moment in life. Enjoy this moment. Joy, we got references, as you know, in Judaism about joy. In the time that when we didn't enjoy ourselves and had everything, it brought along all the punishments.
Right.
So I think it's overlooking. I always love it, when I think I'm enjoying myself. It's just joy is such a wonderful thing. It's a tremendous energy and spiritual energy to it.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And with this attitude, we can have it on tap. Imagine you always have joy on tap. You can always just push the tab and joy issues forth. Well, what else do you always have on tap? Life. So we can start associating life itself with that joy. And we can have that, we can go out of the neural pathway and the taking for granted of life. And as you say, to enjoy yourself. Yeah, I love it. I love it. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. We'll see you, God willing, and hopefully we will actually see you next week.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Thank you.